I'd like to introduce Mark Dalton, the Director of Sales Consulting at Domo. Mark's been at Domo since 2013, building its sales capability. They're also a gold sponsor today, so we're excited to have them, and thank you. Domo is a cloud-based business management platform focused on making data more accessible to business leaders. We're welcoming Mark in his presentation, Data Optimization in Advanced Architecture.
All right, thank you. Is this thing on? Can you hear me? Okay. The title of my presentation is actually not Data Optimization and Advanced Architecture. We can do some discussion on the architecture piece, but we thought we would change it up a little bit to talk about data-driven business. And as I look through the list of presentations and speakers today, there seems to be a lot of interest in data-driven decision-making. And really my presentation is all about kind of Domo's take on what that means and how our product really enables that. A little bit of background about myself, as Lizzie said, I've been with Domo for about 3 years now. I came from IBM, where I sold Cognos. I've been at MinneAnalytics a few times doing presentations. And so great group of people, and thank you for the time today. And if you really, really wanted to see advanced architecture, I'm not offended if you just leave and go to lunch right away. I won't be offended. So really what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through a deck that just kind of lays out the framework of how we approach the problem. We're going to then dive into a little bit of a demo to show you some live product and really how that looks in the actual product itself. And if there's time, fingers crossed, we'll have time for some Q&A. I do want to introduce some colleagues of mine. If you have follow-up questions, we do have a booth out in the hallway. But my counterpart on the sales team is Mark Wittenberg. So find Mark if you have any questions. We find when we do these types of presentations that there's a lot of interest. Domo is a marketing machine. I don't know if you've ever been on LinkedIn, and Domo just kind of dominates that whole space. If you ever see an ad on Domo, don't click the link. Go to the website directly because it costs us a lot of money to advertise on LinkedIn. But there's a lot of stuff that you can see on the web. I mean, our CEO is a sales guy at heart. We have a marketing machine, and we're getting out there. But a lot of people don't know what we do. And that's really kind of what we're trying to accomplish today, is really talk about what it means to be a cloud-based business management platform. Business analytics is a huge space. It's been around forever. And really, I think we have a unique perspective on it. So we'll get right into it. I'm gonna buzz through this deck pretty quick. We'll have some fun with it. And if you have any burning questions during the presentation, feel free to shoot them out there. We want to kind of make sure that you guys get your money's worth. So the deck really kind of introduces the problem, which a lot of us are aware of. But the first one is, there's a ton of money being spent on data solutions, right? It's a huge, huge market. The money that gets spent annually for years and years and years, and it's really surprising to me that it continues because it seems to be good money after bad sometimes. And so, it's a huge industry. Obviously, you guys know this, being practitioners. And so really the problem is, so the problem is we're not being satisfied as business users, especially to really drive the business. So we're going to talk about data-driven decisions from the 60s. You would go into your advertising agency, and the guys with the slick hats would tell you, don't worry, your money is working. It's the money that you're giving us, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. And that's kind of how it was back in the day. Fast forward to 2016, data-driven decisions in today's world. Very complex landscape. A lot of products. Every one of these logos is an application. They're a vendor, just like we are. And so it's a very fragmented and complex landscape when we talk about data-driven decision making. So, the definition of insanity. We all know what that is, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. It's a cliche, but it's true, right? We continue to do the same things over and over and over again. So Domo commissioned a study a couple years ago to kind of talk about and address this problem. So it was a study of over 1,000 kind of business leaders, I guess, people that we have within our network. 57% of business decision makers can't access the information they need. 68% struggle to make sense of their business information. And then this is really the kicker. 80% of leaders, business decision makers, feel like they don't receive the information to answer their questions. right? So there's a ton of data out there, as we all know, but as we filter that up to the people who need it, there's a huge gap in terms of what that means and how they act on it and what they do about it. And that's really kind of where we fit in and what we're trying to address. So we're all drowning in data, but we're thirsty for information, right? So I love this deck because there's just a lot of really cool pictures in it. And so, I don't know if you guys are feeling that as well, but, in our perspective, we hear from our customers over and over again that we just have too much data or the data isn't accessible. And the people who work with the data are really good at it, but it's just not kind of bubbling up to the fact or to the point where we can make decisions on it and really kind of do something about it. So really, who's driving your data decision or your data-driven business is really the theme of this presentation. And there's three things: stay in the driver's seat, fuel your data, and enable your drivers. And we're going to talk about kind of each one of those as we go along. So staying in the driver's seat, it all starts with questions, business questions. So action starts with the question. And if we look at in normal everyday life, what's the weather in New Orleans? Are there any flights, any earlier flights home? What's the best restaurant? And we get answers to those questions, the Weather Channel, Delta.com, Yelp, right? So these are applications that are going to enable us to answer those questions. And then recently, can a swipe change my life? And Tinder says yes, right? So all of that, those questions that we ask go into our personal life as well. Transform that into kind of the business world, and we're going to talk about kind of sales and marketing oriented information. What new deals and ACV closed this week? Am I on pace to hit my SAO goals, sales accepted opportunities? Am I on pace this month to hit my targets? How are support call volumes trending? Which campaigns are driving leads, et cetera, et cetera. And then really the answers to those questions, should be readily available to your decision makers. What new deals? Walmart, Facebook, and Apple. 500K total ACV. Current projections for SA goals say we're at 90% of our target. 15% below Monday's average for call volume, et cetera, et cetera. Pretty reasonable types of questions to ask and expect answers for, but the platforms that we have today for these leaders, the leaders just really don't support getting easy answers to those types of questions. So we're going to focus on this one. How am I on pace to hit my SAO goals? So a lot of marketers in the room. Raise your hand if you're in marketing or marketing automation. A few, right? So SAO, there's some acronyms and some buzzwords. SAO is just a sales accepted opportunity. If I'm a marketer, I'm generating leads, whether it's an email, a call, a physical event such as this. We want to turn those into opportunities on the sales side. So the question is, how am I on pace, right? Am I going to hit my goal for the month? This can be translated to anything that we have to track towards on a given month to make sure that we hit our target. It could be opportunities, it could be sales, it could be whatever finance measures that you want to put in there as well. So really with Domo, we consider, and you're going to see this pyramid quite often, but I think it's really indicative of the Domo platform. And not to get too salesy, but we feel like we have 5 platforms in one. And if we kind of build up the pyramid, in order to answer that question, am I on pace to hit my SAO goal, to get to the answer that I'm at 90% of my projection, there is a process that needs to take place in terms of getting the data, preparing the data, visualizing the data, and that's really what this pyramid addresses. So the first one is, I need to connect and get the data. So in this particular case, our leads data comes from Salesforce. Our target data comes from the most prevalent BI tool in the world, which is Excel. Everybody has Excel. It's never going to go away. And so a lot of people will track things like budget, targets, quotas in Excel because there's no other system that's really useful for that particular purpose. The next kind of layer up the pyramid is the prepare layer. I need to, if I'm going to do a projection or a percent of quota or a percent of target, I need both of those data sets in one table, if you will, so that I can do that calculation. And that's where the prepare layer comes in. And there's an ETL component built into Domo that I'm going to show you guys. It does allow average business folks, if they're kind of in tune with their data, especially data analysts and the like, to prepare their data inside of Domo. And then really the visualize piece is really, I need to create what we call a card, and a card is just the visualization. The card says, really, here's the information that I need. Best of breed visualizations, in my opinion. Most of the BI tools kind of stop here. There are some applications that allow you to connect to data. A lot of them have ETL components in them. And then obviously visualization tools have been around for a long time. But really the value for Domo, we think, is going beyond that. And this is really about driving your business. This is about business decision making. The next step up is my sales managers and my reps need to have shared access to this information. So the sharing piece of it becomes really, really big, and we make it very, very easy to share and disseminate data out to the people who need it. And then going a step further up into the optimize level, it's all about taking action with predictive or proactive alerting or recommendations of additional content. And that's really kind of the full stack of the pyramid. And again, most tools in our kind of my experience stop at visualize. They really don't do anything to help a user kind of take advantage of the product in terms of engaging and collaborating and then ultimately alerting and kind of that proactive predictive piece of it. So the second one, fuel your data. So we live in a really, really interesting world, and if we go to the next one. So as your business evolves, so your data has to evolve. You know, when I started my career, it was we've got a data warehouse, and we're going to pull some data into a data mart, and we're going to build a cube on it, and then we're going to give it to whoever needs that cube. That still happens a lot, but just like Apple, as you saw Apple evolve over time, and the PC evolve over time, so if you start way up there on the left, I never had one of those, but you know, wasn't too far over, I had one of these. And now we're down here to our phones, and everything is right on our phones, right? It's a mobile world. And so your data has to evolve as your business evolves as well. And really, you know, the way we approach that is there's a huge amount of data readily available using an API, an application programming interface. So the old school way, if you needed Salesforce data to combine with a spreadsheet, pull it down into a data warehouse, pull everything into your data warehouse, do your joins and do your combination in your data warehouse, and then serve it up to your users. We don't need to do that anymore because a lot of the data that's out there lives in readily accessible over the internet in secure modern methods to get those data out, right? So we have 400 connectors into various applications, and it's growing all the time. We live in an API-driven world. That's all there is to it. So if you look at the modern technology, the modern data sets, you know, there's 25 connectors in the middle kind of rainbow. And it's really interesting because 75% of our customers are met, their needs are met by those 25 connectors. Now, this does ignore traditional on-premise databases. So that's an important piece of the puzzle as well. We're making no doubt about it, and we have ways to get data from those applications as well. So that's a big piece of it, and it depends on your company and kind of what your data strategy is. But for the most part, a lot of companies have data in these applications, and it makes it very easy for us to get that data and then ultimately get it into other applications. So if, you know, we're constantly building out connectors, and it's really interesting because we're kind of at the mercy of some of these vendors sometimes, and you know, Facebook changes their API all the time, and then we need to be on top of that, and we need to kind of grow accordingly. But you know, this is going to just continue, in my opinion, to really expose everything over the internet. That's just kind of the world that we live in. And so we're all about kind of using that API-based framework to get data, but then also, because we know what that API looks like, to deliver pre-built content around a business question. So, for example, we have what we call a quick start within Domo. A quick start is you literally, and we've got, I think, 50 quick starts into various applications. So if you're a Google Analytics client and you're using Google Analytics to measure your website information, you go into Domo and you put in your username and password for Google Analytics, and this dashboard or a very similar dashboard gets deployed automatically. So that time to value is really important as well, and that agility to be able to get something stood up, and most of the time it's not the end game. Most of the time we need to customize it and combine it and tweak it, but you can do that. But it's a starting point. We don't have to start from scratch at all points, right? So we're really all about agility and time to value. So the last one, enabling your drivers. And this, I think, is critical when we talk about the business problem of data-driven decision making. So we live in a sharing economy. Uber, Airbnb. I mean, these things are all out there, and our applications and our mobile devices allow us to get access very, very easily. And then everything today seems to be about sharing it with someone, whether you take a picture of your lunch and share it with your kid or whatever that might be. And I think that should apply to business analytics and business management as well. Getting information into other people's hands can only help us by having this collaborative environment in which we can work with, because the more eyes on it, the better, right? I might not know that, you know, Dave Hebner, one of my other colleagues, or Mark Wittenberg, is a specialist in that area. But by sharing what I'm doing with them, a lot of times we can gain additional insight into the problem, really just to help move the needle. So in this case, spotting the inefficiency. So we've got the CEO, his direct reports, and then ultimately kind of individual contributors. 200 decision makers in the company, people who need to act and do something with data to make a decision, but 6 decision enablers. So a decision enabler is a data scientist or an analyst or a database administrator, someone who serves up and provides data to the other 194 people in the organization. And really this is the crux of the problem, is that those 194 people in the organization, their needs really haven't been met because there's a bottleneck. And I was in IT, I was a DBA and a BI developer, and we all know what the problem is. People are asking us for things all the time. We have a backlog. Pretty soon we deliver it, and then things have changed because the business changes. So that constant struggle is really the reason why a lot of these people, they just don't get the information they need, which goes back to the 80% of CEOs and VPs who feel like they don't get the information they need to run their business. So imagine the possibilities if we turn those 200 decision makers into 200 decision enablers. And so it's somewhat disruptive, I think, and a lot of people get kind of freaked out by it, to be honest, to enable a decision maker higher up in the organization to get their own data, to be able to prepare their own data. Traditionally, that's been the domain of data people. But we're trying to kind of move the needle a little bit and get that process moved up so that business people can finally have a self-service environment in which to work with. Self-service is a buzzword that's been around since forever. And it usually meant self-service within the confines of what the DBAs and the data architects have provided you, with little flexibility in terms of how that evolves over time. And we're really trying to change that and really kind of put the onus on these decision makers to get their own data and to do their own thing within the platform. And you're probably all thinking, that's just a bunch of BS. We've been trying to do that forever, which, there is a sense of, I think, reality into this. And so it's not all, unicorns and rainbows. But we feel that, especially with the API-based applications and getting your own data, we really are making a difference in terms of that self-service capability inside of our platform. Now a demo. Before I get into the demo, any questions, comments? Anybody want to call BS on me? Yes?
Well, I'm going to call a little BS on you. When you show your data sources and your use of APIs, you have a lot of information there that I don't want anyone else to see.
Sure.
I don't want the ADP payroll data going to the marketing guy. I don't want the FMLA lead coming out of Workday going anywhere else. How are you limiting the access to that information to make those business decisions?
Right. That's a great question. And obviously, we don't want every line level worker to have information on payroll, right? So it's really, becomes, I think, the art of this problem. It is flexibility and freedom on the side of the business people with governance on the side of the IT people. And so there's some specific things inside of the product, that we can allow the product to determine who's going to see what, row level security, column level security, access to pages and cards, et cetera. But for the most part, it's a governance process issue. Whereas if, I don't have an access to ADP, but my VP of finance does, and she might go in, or her admin might go in and pull that data from ADP into Domo, and then they can do it with what they want. So they don't have to share it if they don't want to. So the thing about Domo is no matter what you do, no matter what level of organization or access you have, everything is private until you explicitly share it with someone else. So it's not a free-for-all. I mean, there are some rules behind it, but again, if I'm a sales rep, and I have access to Salesforce.com, I want to be able to log into Salesforce through Domo and pull that data in for my own purposes. We also probably have a Salesforce admin who logs in to get everything that we can then give to sales managers, and then we can trickle that down as well. So it's a fair point, and that's probably one of the biggest questions we get is, it's interesting, but it scares me, right, about data governance and just that access. But we do a good job in the product of isolating data when we need to.
So where does your metadata layer sit? So if you're going to push this out to the business is going to have access. Where does that context for the business to understand the data or that metadata layer?
So it's all in the platform. So we're a cloud-based application. The question was, where does the metadata live? How do we kind of provide that semantic layer or that isolation layer? It's all in Domo, in the application, and admins have access to it. We have a role that we call the major Domo, which is really that admin type of person. So Domo, if you don't know, Domo means thank you in Japanese, and our CEO I guess he's got a strong interest in Japan, and he goes over all the time, and so he kind of pushes that as well. But I think it's interesting. We are a SaaS model, so software as a service, so it's an annual subscription. And if you're not saying thank you, this is kind of how we pitch it. If you're not saying thank you to us year over year, we haven't done our job. And so the Domo thing works. But as a result of that Domo thing, there's a lot of Japanese kind of influence, including the major Domo. So that's the person who's going to be that administrator of that type of metadata or semantic layer to business people. And we can follow up with this. It's very different than a traditional modeled BI environment. I mean, I used to work for Cognos, and Framework Manager was where we would live and breathe, and we would create models that would get really exposed, and then the queries would all come through there. It's a little different being in the cloud because we don't have that direct to the database query type of functionality. So it's a different model, but it's the end result is the same. All right, another one? Yep. 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 So that's where the prepare piece comes in. So data cleansing, data mashup, fixing data inside of the application would happen within the application. And then again, it goes back to the governance issue. We have kind of the standard way that you would present data to a group of users. That's going to be that's the data. And we have ways to lock down dashboard pages. And so if you're a guy logging in and you want to see sales data that is the blessed sales data, you're going to log in and you're going to see that data. And we've locked it and we've governed it and we've kind of cleansed it the way that we want to administratively. But to be honest, it's a different world. I think business people are demanding access to information. And we used to always talk about the single version of the truth. How many people have heard that a million times? And it doesn't exist, in my opinion. And I think it's not really worth even discussing because we all know it doesn't exist and it'll never exist. That's my opinion. Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Agreed. To me, that's a process question or a process issue. We have the tooling within the platform to help you with that process, but again, it really depends on your comfort level, I guess, with that, dealing with that issue. If you're really concerned about it, you can lock the product down. And so everything that you're going to see in terms of connecting to data, powering up a quick start or a dashboard, we can take that away if we want to as administrators. But a lot of people want the freedom. They want people to go out there and do it. They know that there's a company-blessed number on all these different metrics, but some people are going to have their own versions of it, and that's fine in certain cases. So I think that's going to be the age-old problem that we may never solve in this space, but I think we do have a pretty good story around it in terms of just kind of core security and access control in the platform.
So you are talking about data cleansing. Do you cleanse the data? Is that data going to be residing in Domo?
It is.
So you have a second layer of security from if somebody gets Domo, they have to build additional security from the traditional data security in Domo.
So the question was about inheriting security roles from a database into the Domo application, and we can do that. We can inherit roles, access rights from various applications so that they flow through so that you don't have to recreate them. So things like Active Directory integration. If you've created groups and you have access control in Active Directory, or really any SAML-based product. SAML 2.0 is the kind of the assertion language or the standard for security. We're SAML 2.0 compliant, so Salesforce.com, a lot of the other applications are certified that way. We can plug directly into those applications and inherit that security inside of Domo. All right, let's get into it. I have, how many do I have on time? 10 minutes till Q&A, perfect. We're gonna get through this demo pretty quickly. So we're gonna go back to that problem, or that question was, am I on pace to hit my SAO goals? But it's really any question around, am I gonna hit my target, or where am I going? So this is Domo. This is, again, we're a cloud-based platform, 100% web-based. We live in the Amazon cloud. AWS is our hosting provider. We have some purpose-built technology inside of Amazon, along with some off-the-shelf kind of big data technology behind the scenes to host the data, so massively scalable. We don't ever have kind of that query performance that you're gonna get with a lot of traditional kind of BI tools where you have to hit a database every time. The performance and the scalability, you know, is world-class. Obviously, Amazon, best-of-breed hosting provider as well. You can see that the cards that I referenced earlier, the visualizations are simply charts, bars, tables, et cetera, assembled on a dashboard. So the unit of measure, or the core object, is what we call a card. We also have dashboard pages across the top. Again, this is all configurable. It's all up to you guys to determine what this looks like and how you roll it out to your users. And then over on the right is what we call Domo Buzz. And when I referenced earlier that most BI tools will stop at that visualize layer, the 2 layers above it, collaborate and optimize, are really kind of what this is all about. So this is business intelligence meets Twitter or Facebook. You know, the ability to easily pull someone into a conversation, the ability to see threaded messages related to a bit of content really allows you to have a very effective and easy decision-making process. So we wanted to deal with kind of SAOs, and so I'm gonna go into search, full text search within the platform. I'm just gonna search on SAO. So here's a card called SAO pacing. I click on it, I'm brought right to the card, and again, this card just tells me what are my actuals. These are my leads coming from Salesforce.com. What's my projection? These are my targets coming from Excel spreadsheet, or any other application that you want to pull into Domo to then be able to combine with other data. Here's my month goal, and then here's my original projection. We may alter things as we go through, right? So again, I can see my current projection versus my actuals versus my goals all in one card. So the other cards on this page, if I go back, this is a marketing-oriented dashboard. All sorts of information in this dashboard from really multiple disparate systems. Things like Marketo, Eloqua, Salesforce.com, Excel spreadsheets, SAP, traditional relational databases, all in one dashboard, all arranged however I want to arrange it. So I've put my SAO pacing card up on the top left, but you know, just some functionality just around the user experience. All of these things are portable. Cards can live on multiple pages. Cards can be built from multiple data sets. And so it really does enable the user to have a customized experience. If I go to the drop down on this card, just things that I can do with it. Export it, shoot it to someone in an email, share it with someone. I'm gonna go ahead and add it to my favorites page. And by doing that, I'm now building up my scheduled reporting. So how many people have been involved in traditional business intelligence, bursting, scheduled reporting, shooting it out to a bunch of people on email? It's a broken process because nobody reads the stuff that you send them. Hate to break it to you, but they don't. And if they do, they ignore everything but 1 or 2 numbers within that spreadsheet or that report. I had one woman tell me that she was conditioned, she got a big, massive spreadsheet in an email, and she counted down 200 rows, and she counted over 5 columns, and that was the only thing she needed from this massive spreadsheet. But yet, we continued to build and send that out for her, regardless of kind of how she used it. And the way we solve that is we let users determine what they're gonna get in their scheduled report. By putting that card on my favorites page, I've added it to my daily Domo, which is my daily scheduled report. So I'm a business person, I can control what I see in my inbox, and it's always changing, and I can change it over time as well. So it's really nice to just put the control again in the hands of the business users. If I go back to my SAO pacing card, we can see on the bottom, we've got some metadata around usage of this card. Who has access to it? Who's looked at it, who's clicked on it, other cards that are associated with it. So in this case, I can see that there's 23 people that have access to it. I might change that. I might want to share this with someone. So we can see that Dave Hebner has access to it, but I'm going to also pull in Mark Wittenberg, and I'm going to share this with him because this is really cool. So I'm going to share that with Mark. Mark just got a text message, an email message that says Mark shared this with you. He can click on it on his mobile device, click on it in his browser, and he has access to it now. And I have the authority, because I'm an admin within the system or an owner of this card to share that with Mark. If I'm not, I can't share it with anybody, so I don't have access to it. And then we can start to kind of interact and use the collaborative aspects of Domo to pull someone else into the conversation. So I might want to call out to Dave or Mark by @mentioning them, just like you would do in any social media application, is @mention someone. So here's Mark and Dave. Notice that I can either send a private message to them or I can send a kind of a spam, a blast, if you will. And I'm just going to tell them, this is cool, check it out. So I send that within the Domo Buzz platform, within the collaboration platform. What that does is it eliminates the email that we all go through. You find something cool in a report, you run your report, you put it into an email, you send it to 20 people. When I was doing that, when I was working in BI, I would always run my own report because I didn't ever trust what they were giving me. And I wanted to see it for myself. Pretty soon we've got 16 different reports that people are looking at, and you guys know the drill. This kind of solves that because it's collaboration, but it's in context of what we're looking at. So when I get a message from someone saying, hey, we're off on our SAO pacing, I have no idea what they're talking about a lot of times, and I don't have any context of what the data is telling me. Domo Buzz, we see it right in front of us, which is a really nice way to kind of just have that communication, that collaboration in the context of the data that we're looking at. And then lastly, that top level of the pyramid, which is really the proactive nature, managing by exception. We don't all have time to do this exercise and to log into a portal and to kind of look for things. So the systems should tell us when things of interest are happening. And we do this by setting alerts on anything that we have access to in the system. So in this case, I want to look at my current projection. And if my projection changes by 10% or increases by a certain value, or whatever the case may be, whatever my threshold is, I'm going to save that. And then when new data comes in, every alert gets evaluated, and then everybody who subscribes to that alert will get notified proactively so that we can get ahead of some of the issues that we might have based on the fact that our projections are going the wrong way. And then there's a built-in alerts dashboard page that really kind of gives us, across the board, everything that we might be monitoring, everything that we might be interested in. A lot of people will just go here and look at all of the alerts that they have available to them and to kind of see how they plan out their day, right? So it's a nice way to just kind of be informed and manage your business by exception. So in 5 more minutes of demo, how does it all work, right? So that's a big question. If I go back to this dashboard, and if we focus on the data side of things, you'll notice that the bottom right-hand corner of all of these cards will tell us what the data is. This is coming from a data set called marketing output data. This is coming from, there's a lot of this data is coming from Marketo or SAP or whatever the case may be. If I go to my overview page, I've got a lot of different cards assembled on this page, and we can see Salesforce.com. We have a connector into YouTube. We've got some data coming from NetSuite, et cetera, et cetera. So this is getting data from those applications that we have connectors for. And then if we go to the database behind it, so when we first started this company, we said we were all about the business, meeting the needs of the business user. But we realized very quickly that we also needed to meet the needs of the people who work with data. Hence the creation of this major Domo role, the person who needs to get in there and work with the data to prepare it to deliver it to other users. So there's a very robust database behind this. The data center is going to tell me all of the data sets that I have access to. So if we look at this list, I have access to all of these data sets within the application, and these data sets can be really coming from anywhere, whether it's Marketo or the news feed from CNN or coming from Excel spreadsheets or Salesforce.com. The list goes on. And if I look at our connector list, this is really where the rubber hits the road in terms of getting data from those applications. Any one of these 437 connectors, if I had the credentials to log into them, I could pull data back from those connectors to create a data set. At that point, I can build a card from it, I can mash it up with other data, I can prepare it, visualize it, etc. But it's a very extensive list. There are a lot of companies who specialize in this, and we meet or beat them in terms of just the sheer number of connectors that we have and that we're continuing to build. So if I scroll through here, a lot of people will recognize, we use Bright Edge or Bugly or whatever, Bullhorn. And that's a good conversation because then we can get that data directly into Domo just using your username and password. And then in terms of data mashup, we have what we call a data flow. So data flow is essentially just that. It's the ability to write SQL or to visually drag and drop things onto a canvas to prepare an ETL process. So if you're into writing SQL, MySQL or Redshift, those are the execution engines that we leverage inside of Amazon. You can do anything you can do in a SQL script or a stored procedure, you can do inside of Domo. And when you think about that, pulling data from 5 different sources and then immediately being able to write data or kind of write code to manipulate it is pretty powerful. And the old school way of doing it, put it all into a common database, import it, translate it, and then write your code. Especially when we talk about data from APIs and modern systems, we really kind of solve that by letting you just, again, go directly at it. So I built one of these just to kind of show you what we call magic ETL. This is really, if anybody works for Informatica or has familiarity with Informatica, it's very similar, and very similar concept. I'm going to drag a widget onto the screen. That widget could be an input source, it could be an output source, and then it could be any number of ways to manipulate and transform and clean your data. So things like filtering rows, doing search and replace on values, group bys, selecting different columns, et cetera. And then the edit data is all about just cleaning and deduping and filtering. So that data prep layer allows you to cleanse and really prepare the data for the visualization, which is how we're going to build all the cards. And then lastly, a bit of eye candy. Now that we've got all that data in and we've prepared it, when I was a DBA, I would have paid a lot of money to have this view, which is really the data warehouse viewer inside of Domo. So it's a visual way to look at what's happening inside of your database. In this case, it's the Domo database, but as it revolves and spins, and it's been referred to as the Death Star and the rotating whatever. If I hover over the outside ring are everything coming in on that connect piece. So these are things coming in like from Instagram or Facebook. And when we have active loads, it's really nice to see there's data coming in. And the color coding tells me when things have been successful or not. The inside ring are all derived data sets that we've generated from whether we're either going to write SQL or we've created that process using Magic ETL, which is the drag and drop interface. But then if I wanted to, obviously this is a big one. Here's a lot of information coming into this. The height, the status, or the number of rows is indicated by the height of the pillar here. When I click on it now, I get specific information about that particular source of data. And then these are all individual data sets. Oops, click too soon. Individual data sets coming, in this case, from NetSuite. So if I hover over these are data sets that a user theoretically could build a card on. And if I look at it, I get more information about that particular data set. So from an administration perspective, this is really awesome. This is a visual peek into what's happening within your database. And then you can take action directly from it. So if I wanted to take this data then, and then either export it, run the transformation that we've built on it, or create a new transform from it, I can do that right from here. And then it's always nice to see who's built things on the data that we've prepared for them. So a lot of times that visibility aspect is kind of hard to get. We all know what cards have been connected to what data sets, and then ultimately who has access to those data sets, which kind of helps with the, I'm going to make a change here, and I hope nobody notices it, and I hope I don't get fired. This will tell you, you know what, your CEO looks at this card every day, you better be careful with it. And that visibility is really something that's just baked into the product. All right, so usually I get a big round of applause for this data warehouse view, but that's, no, that's fine. So we have 5 minutes for questions. Yep. Is Domo open source? In a sense, yes. So we're an open platform, and there are some open source technology that we use to build Domo, and we are working on, over time, kind of releasing SDKs to allow you to program against it. Is that the nature of your question? Can I kind of... Yeah, so there's APIs that we expose to customers for data acquisition, user management. So if you wanted to write a Java program to do loading your own data, you can do that for sure, or a command line or Python or Perl or whatever the case may be. And then the data flow perspective, we're getting a lot of interest in, when I write a data flow, I have a routine that I've written in R. And I want to shoot some data to it, and then I want to bring the results back, whether that's a statistical analysis, a regression, whatever you want to do in R, or any other program that's open, we can feed that data back into a data flow and then ultimately write the results. Question here? Yeah, question about embedding Domo in other SaaS applications, and the answer is yes. So especially if you support single sign-on in that application, it can be a seamless two-way switch back and forth. Most often we see that in Salesforce use cases where there's a tab inside of Salesforce, and then Domo is just a page inside of that tab. Everything is also URL addressable. So if you take a card, you can grab the URL on the top and put that into whatever you want. In all honesty, we don't yet have kind of that web portal part integration that you see in other platforms where you can call out to a card and get the data programmatically, but that is on our roadmap. Yeah, so the ability to take the data from an individual card, pull it out, and put it wherever you want is coming very shortly. Any other questions? Yeah, for sure. So there's the Help Center, there's a community that you can go to as a user. The Help Center will give you all sorts of tutorials, and then we do have classroom and on-site training from our education department. Not yet. So Freemium is on the offering very quickly, where you'll be able to spin up a Domo instance, use it for a few weeks or whatever, and then kind of see if you want to evaluate it. That has always been on the roadmap, and that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, because I think it allows you to very easily get into Domo. If you do want more exposure to Domo, and if you want to work on a trial, we would encourage you to call out to your local rep to get more information, get a demo, and then possibly talk about doing a POC or some kind of a trial. Question?
How do you see Domo evolving with the Internet of Things, real-time data,
Yeah, absolutely. So if I go back to that data warehouse view, that is kind of a real-time feed of data coming from our databases. But we also have other use cases where, I mean, this thing is, you can do anything with this in terms of programming it. So in terms of the Internet of Things, we have a couple of customers who are working on devices on, like SAB Miller is one of our biggest customers, biggest brewing conglomerate in the world now that they've combined with AB InBev. So Budweiser and Miller are now combined. But they have sensors on their refrigerators that will tell whether the fridge is too cold, whether the door's been open, and those sensors then feed to a database. And what they're looking at doing is taking that information and pushing it just using messaging technology into Domo in a real-time way. So we're going to see more, when we've heard more and more of those use cases, but the technology is definitely there. And then when you combine that with really any kind of visualization that you might want to do, really the sky's the limit. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does the licensing work? Does it depend on the data sources number, or is it a fixed license?
Yeah, good question. So it's all about licensing. What's our license model? And it's a per user per year. If I had to distill it down into its simplest form, per user per year, and then there's an annual platform fee that just kind of takes care of keeping the lights on, connecting to your data. The connectors that we saw, you have a la carte access to all of those connectors. And we don't, at this time, we don't charge for how much data you pull in and how often you refresh it. So it's unlimited volumes coming in as well, and there's no cost implication of that as well. We want your data in our platform, selfishly, to get you hooked on Domo. And so the more data you bring in, the better. We don't want to limit that.
Do you integrate with Tableau?
Well, that's a good question. We do, in a certain sense. I mean, Tableau's reports can be scraped on a URL, and we can embed them in a Domo card. There's no native, I don't think there's an API for Tableau.
Somebody build like a dashboard, or one of the dashboards that you actually come up with. Can you then take that dashboard, put it through a Tableau screen, and that Tableau user don't have to redesign the dashboard? We can pretty much see the same thing that's being displayed.
Yeah, no. No, I don't think we ever will be. Why would you want to do that? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Tableau. I'm sorry if I offended any Tableau users. Tableau is a good tool. All right. Anything else? Very good. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Mark.